And I mean, like how much data you guys usually take in consideration, like 3 months, 6 months, or what kind of things?
But
Mm.
at the same time, we're seeing margins in the agency space get tighter and tighter and tighter every year. COVID, remote work, AI, globalization.
To get the right kind of a data, play around with it, and then present it in and take the final calls accordingly.
They're generating all of this data, but what we found was most of them were getting little to no value from that data. They didn't really understand how to take all this information they were collecting every
Hello and welcome to the Agency Growth Lab. I'm your host, Rohan Dua, and today we are thrilled to have a very special guest joining us, Marcel Petitpas, who is the director at Parakeeto and is the guy who actually helping digital and creative agencies to make them profitable in the web space. So yeah, Marcel is here today to share his insights and experiences with us. So welcome to the show, Marcel. How are you?
Rowan, I am doing great. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege to have you up here on the show, man. And you're really doing, I can see some exciting stuff at Parakeeto. So you definitely want to know more about it, how you're really doing and all that. But really quickly, I mean, like, just tell me a bit about your journey in the digital marketing industry.
Well, like a lot of people, one of my first businesses was a digital marketing agency. We were actually doing real estate virtual reality services before you could do it with your iPhone. So that was back when if you wanted to create a 3D tour of a home, you had to go in with a DSLR camera, and each hot spot you had to take like 30 photos, stitch them together into a 3D image, load them into software. And so it was very labor intensive to create a 3D tour. Today, there's like an app on your phone that you can do it in an hour. So at that time, that's what we were doing. And I became very familiar with the problems that we solve today at Parakeeto in that there were very tight margins in that business. Real estate agents, it was a buyer's market. So they were really not investing a lot of money into their listings. That process could take 20, 30 hours to do properly. And so I realized very early on in that agency, I didn't actually have enough gross margin in my service to be able to scale that business. And so that was my first look at how important it is to have an understanding of the numbers, about your margins, and really know what levers you have to pull in order to make your business model scalable. So from there, I got interested in software, got introduced to a friend of mine, Jared, who runs a software development agency, and he had the same problem. His team was spending a couple days a week building spreadsheets to measure all these things. And he said, look, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that was my entry point into saying, yeah, let's try to solve this problem for other agencies.
Oh, that's super, man. That's super. Exactly. That's true. Because I always believe anything which can be done manual, there might be a way to automate the entire process as well. It's just a way to find it out. These days, we have got APIs, we have got a systems in place. So yeah, we can always connect and get the things. I remember there was
So
some on Shark Tank, and that was very much a similar idea as well. I remember, and that guy actually got a kind of funding as well for the virtual reality thing for the real estate guys. Oh, I think that was in the second season or something. So yeah, that was actually a very good idea, very profitable as well, because for a person like me, or especially maybe someone or kind of a millionaires or someone who don't really have a time, these kind of virtual tours can really help them to speed up the entire process as well from their own space. So yeah.
yeah, and that was a big part of the reason that I stepped away from that business. The technology pipeline
Oh,
was, I mean, incredible, but it meant that anybody could do this. It wasn't going to take a lot of expertise to do it in the future. And so I want to come back to something that you said though earlier, which is around automating
oh
some of these
yeah.
processes. And with something like that, there's a lot of efficiency that came from it. But this is one of the misconceptions that I find a lot of agency owners are struggling with is I talk to people every week and they come to me and they're like, hey, I just want to automate all of this reporting. I want a dashboard that shows me how profitable I am and how my projects are doing. And the unfortunate reality is that's not possible. But everyone's trying to do it. And that way of thinking is exactly what's holding them back from actually being able to get a grip on their numbers. And it's part of what we're trying to educate people on is that enterprise doesn't even do this. There's something called, data operations. It's a function in the business, and data is messy. And you just have to accept the data is messy and have a process that allows you to fix it, as opposed to this kind of idealistic world where all the data that your team puts into these systems is clean and perfect and well structured, and they never make mistakes, and then those go straight into a report, and you can rely on that. It's just not how the world works, and so that's one of the traps that people fall into, is trying to automate this stuff that really shouldn't be automated.
Yep, yep. No, I agree to this because a lot of people, a lot of agencies I actually come across, they're literally still using Google Sheets. And they're pretty happy with that. Like they believe like everything is in the Google Sheet. Why do we really need a CRM? So we go and tell them the same kind of thing because you don't know where your data is coming in, how many leads are coming in. We use Zoho CRM in our agency, but I guess there is still a lot of data leaks happening around the way because sometimes the data doesn't really come up properly. Sometimes the webhook actually get pitched up, so you don't really get everything. And when you get the garbage kind of a data, sometimes that's something you believe it's good, and that's something you present it to your clients or take the calculative decisions at the end of the day as well. So I think that is really very important the way you guys are saying it to get the right kind of a data, play around with it, and then present it in and take the final calls accordingly.
Yeah,
Yay.
and I think this is like the big idea, right? Is if you look at what big companies have done for decades
Yeah.
when they have these big data problems, is they build a data pipeline.
Yep.
They use an ETL framework, extract, transform, load. And that middle step, the transform step, is the part that small businesses seem to be missing, where they want to extract and load it, but innately they end up in spreadsheets. Why? Because every time they try to do that, they're like, oh, this data doesn't look right, or hey, everybody's supposed to track time against design, but now we have 7 different naming conventions for that because nobody follows the naming convention. Or,
Yep.
our cookie, tracking was broken on the website for 4 days, so we're missing a whole bunch of data from that. So,
Yep.
you have these challenges, and the big mistake that everybody makes is designing a system that breaks every time something goes wrong, as opposed to designing a system that expects these things to go wrong, and then just having a mechanism where we can enhance the data, stitch the data, clean the data, normalize the data, and all of these changes and innate things in the process that are going to happen are not going to take the entire reporting system down with it.
Yeah. Just for out of curiosity, do you have a software or computer background or like what?
Yeah, that's what I got into after my first agency. I decided I wanted to be a software founder, not for any good reason, just because I have a superiority complex, and that seemed to be
Okay.
where everybody was making the most money. So it was a very humbling experience. I tried to start a couple of tech companies, they didn't work out, and now with Parakeeto, the first 3 years we were trying to be a pure software company, and
Oh
about
yeah.
3 years in, we realized that software was not going to solve this problem on its own. People also needed education and consulting, because not only do you need to have the right tools to do this kind of stuff, you also need to understand the strategy. And so we switched into being kind of a technology leverage consulting company a couple of years ago. And
Yep.
that was really where I would say we found product market fit. So the TLDR is, yes, I have an extensive background in software, but we've decided to apply that expertise to this particular business model of agencies. And I think that's what allows us to have a bit of a more nuanced take on something that has traditionally been solved by finance and operations professionals, but they don't necessarily have the context to understand best practices when it comes to things like data management.
All right. So although you did mention actually about Parakeeto, tell us a bit more. Let's go a little more deeper into it. What actually
Yeah.
inspired you to start Parakeeto and have a focus on the agency profitability only, not really for any direct B2C like real estate guys or anyone else like a local businesses, but for the agencies itself. What
Yeah.
actually came to your mind that yeah, this is where the loophole is?
Well, it started with the person that, I started this business with. He was trying to solve this problem in his
Oh, yeah.
agency. And so we started with this narrow focus. And, I'm a marketer as well. And I think most marketers understand that it's way easier to market to a very specific customer
Yep.
avatar than it is to market to everybody. It's this ironic thing where the broader your target market is, the harder it is actually to get anyone's attention and say anything that's compelling,
Right.
especially in 2024. And so that was kind of a lucky thing where he happened to have this problem. We started talking to other agencies. They happen to have this problem. And then the deeper we got into this problem, we started to recognize that this problem is unique for, yes, professional services, because that business model is unique. And the way you need to think about measuring that business model is unique. And then specifically within the agency space, we noticed a couple of things that were really interesting. they were early adopters of technology. So
Mm,
agencies, they have tons of software, right? Any agency you go into today, the table stakes are they have a project management software, time tracking software, they're doing resource planning, they have a finance software. Like there's 5 or 6 things that they're using operationally. And so they're generating all of this data. But what we found was most of them were getting little to no value from that data. They didn't really understand how to take all this information they were collecting every day about their business and actually use it to make better decisions. But
mm,
at the same time, we're seeing margins in the agency space get tighter and tighter and tighter every year. COVID, remote work, AI, globalization, all of these things are creating a ton of pricing pressure and more competition. And so it really felt like, okay, we're getting to this point that every industry gets to where margins become tight and you can't get away with just being a good creative designer, being a
fine.
good web developer, being an SEO expert. You also have to be a sophisticated entrepreneur and deeply understand your business model. And so we recognized, hey, no one's really publishing great detailed information on this. Nobody really has a framework that applies to how agencies work in 2024, where people aren't just billing for time anymore. That's our opportunity to really focus on this business model and go deep and
Mhm.
help this industry go through this transition that we're going through right now, which is going from being, able to get away with not really running a tight ship to having to be like really sophisticated entrepreneurs on top of being very talented creative and marketing professionals.
Yep, that's true. And I mean, like, how much data you guys usually take in consideration, like 3 months, 6 months, or what kind of things to do
Sorry,
any
could you repeat
kind
the
of,
question?
I mean, like, to do any kind of analysis, how much data
Mm.
you guys normally take in consideration? Is that for a 3 months kind of a data or 6 months, or what is that?
I mean, it depends on what we're analyzing. I think that's the really important question that everybody needs to be asking themselves when they start going down this path of trying to measure the business is what's the question we're actually trying to answer? Because, for example, if we're just trying to understand the business model and, for example, what the business is capable of, we don't need any historical data to do that.
Mm,
All we need to do is capture the assumptions that currently exist about the business. It's part of the reason we always start with that process because even if you had no time tracking data, no project management data, your books were a mess, we could still get some insight by just taking down information about your team, how much they get paid, how many hours you expect them to work,
yeah,
how you think about pricing when you sell things to clients. With some basic information about that, we could start to get an understanding of, okay, well, what should your business be capable of? What's the best profit margin that you could expect? Is that aligned to your expectations? How does that compare to the industry? And what could we do to your business model at a fundamental level to make that better? That doesn't require any historical information. And then once we start to get into other insights, things like utilization, things like project and client profitability, the amount of time that we need to look at in terms of sample of data really
yeah,
comes down to project life cycles. If you do a lot of very like quick turn projects, we might only need a month or two of data to start to get really good information about what's happening in the business. Whereas if you build enterprise software and it takes you 24 months to do a client engagement, we're going to need a much wider swath of data in order to get insights. So then it becomes a little bit more
on
about
the use
the
case.
context of that specific business. Yeah.
So from the agency perspective itself, I mean, like, what are some of the key metrics or the KPIs that agencies should be tracking at least to measure and improve their overall profitability?
Yeah. I'm going to carve this answer out into 2 sections. The first is financial metrics. And I
Yeah.
usually start there because every agency needs to do some kind of accounting because they got to file their taxes. If they don't
Yep.
file their taxes, they go to jail. So everyone's doing that. And there's limited information you can get from finances, but I would love to see more people tracking 2 metrics in particular that I think would give them a lot more insight. So on the financial side, the important things to understand are number one, what is your delivery margin? That's the term I'm going to use to describe this. And when I explain what it is, some listeners are going to say that sounds a lot like gross margin. And
Yep.
you're right, it does sound a lot like gross margin, but I'm sick of arguing with accountants over semantic
Yep.
issues. So I'm going to call it delivery margin.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we can agree that maybe it's a different thing. So delivery margin, what that measures is when you get paid from a client,
Mm-hmm.
after you remove any pass-through expenses. So let's say, for example, I sell SEO services
Mm-hmm.
and I collect $10,000 a month from a client for my SEO engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And I hire your firm to do SEO work as a white label partner
Right.
to us.
Yep.
And I'm going to give you $4,000 a month of that revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I need to do is strip that $4,000 out because that money doesn't belong to me, it belongs to you.
Yep.
And you get to determine how profitable that $4,000 is. That's not
Like,
a thing that I'm concerned about. So now all of a sudden there's revenue, which is $10,000. Once I take out the $4,000 that goes to an external vendor, I now have $6,000 left. That's what we call agency gross income, or AGI.
yep.
So that's the first thing we need to understand is how much of this money that we collect from clients is actually ours that we
Mm-hmm.
now need to earn
Mm-hmm.
with our business,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
that's step one, AGI. And then the other side of that is, okay, now that's $6,000, what is it going to cost me to earn that revenue? Because if
Yes.
you think about it from a contractual perspective, if I get paid $6,000 from a client, it's not
Marketing.
my money until I did the thing I promised the client I would do.
Yep.
And I'm going to incur a cost to do that
Yep.
thing as an agency owner. And the majority of that cost is going to be my team's time, right? So we then need to understand, what do I spend to earn my revenue? And what we want on our profit and loss statement when we look at our finances every month is we want to have at least 50% of every dollar that a client pays us left to pay for overhead and have a profit. So if
Mm.
I get paid $10,000, I give 4,000 to you, that means I have $6,000 in agency gross income. I want to spend no more than $3,000 on the team and the tools that are required to deliver to that client so
Yep.
that I can then pay for my overhead, sales and marketing expenses, office, lawyers, accountants, etc., and hopefully have 20% or more left over as a profit margin.
Yep.
So that first metric, that delivery margin, that's
Ex-
critically important because it tells me how efficiently do we earn revenue as a business, and are we fundamentally profitable with the work that we do for clients? Or is there a problem in the profit engine of the business in that every time we sell work, we actually just get further and further into a cash flow crunch because we're spending too much money to earn revenue, if that makes sense.
Yep. And do you guys actually at Parakeeto help these agencies to set up their pricing models and that kind of things as well?
We do, yeah, because to your point, often the question when you look at your P&L or we do this analysis and we find that, hey, your delivery margin is not very good, then the question is why and what do we do
Yep.
about that? And we'll get into that when we talk about the three operations metrics. But of course, pricing is one thing that is really important. Is a lot of times what we figure out is, well, when you sold this thing, you were planning to fail from the start. You didn't have enough margin when you priced this in to be profitable. So there's no amount of efficiency. There's no amount of improving utilization that's going to fix that problem of you're just not charging enough for your business model to be
Yep.
viable from the start.
Yep.
So of course we start there, and then we look at, assuming that the pricing model is correct, there could still be other reasons why an agency doesn't have good delivery margins, and we'll get into that in a moment. But yes, to answer your question, our
Yep.
whole business kind of revolves around this metric because if that's not healthy, you won't be profitable. It doesn't
Not
matter what your overhead looks like it that's the foundation of profitability in any kind of service-based business.
exactly right. Exactly right. And you also, I think I was reading on one of your blogs somewhere that you also help them out with the value-based pricing as well. Like help them out
So
with how they need to actually go and
yeah,
value our products and all that.
the perspective that we have on pricing is a little bit different, maybe a little bit more nuanced than what people are used to seeing in the market. Most of the conversation that I see around pricing in the agency space are from people that want to sell agency owners the idea of using one specific pricing model,
Yep.
right? So it's the person that sells a course on how to productize your services, and their perspective is productized services is the best way, flat fees is the best way, or somebody who sells workshops on value-based pricing and their perspective is value-based pricing is the right way. And the truth is, it's not that simple. And you would know this, and everybody listening knows this. How am I going to value-based price something if I don't actually know what the scope is or how long it's going to take,
Exactly right.
right? So like in a scenario like that, is value-based pricing really the best way? And the answer is no. So the reality is that there is a time and a place for selling hours. There's a
Yep.
time and a place for selling what I would call abstracted time materials. So you're still selling time, but you're selling days, weeks, months, and maybe you're selling cross-functional teams. So you abstract away from hours, but you still sell time. There's a time and a place for flat fees, productized services, and there's a time and a place for value-based pricing. And what we help clients understand is which of the pricing models is most likely to give you a consistently good profit margin based on two critical inputs. Number one, what is the value of this service to the client? That's important. But number
Yep,
two, also very important, what is the risk profile of this service? And how likely is it that you can predict how much it will cost you to get something done? Because if you can't predict how much it will cost you, you may not be able to price the risk in. And the trap that people fall into is they start value-based pricing or selling flat rate services, but then it costs them more than what they're getting paid to earn the money. And then we have a delivery margin problem and we're back to square one. We don't actually get an improvement in profitability from this.
exactly. And a lot of friction as well, because when it comes to increasing the, basically, let's say if I'm running agency and I'm getting a proposal, hey, just go and increase the profit margins or increase the value of the product, then there is a lot of friction really gonna come out from the customer end as well, because maybe they're gonna feel shy to actually try the product because I'm telling them to added another 20% something on top of that to increase my profitability. So
Right.
yeah, it is
So
right,
this,
it's wrong some way or another. So I think a
yeah.
close balance is really required in that case. At the same time, is that really you guys help them out with finding them the right kind of a partners or vet those out to increase from that way to increase the profitability? So there are two ways. The one is to actually increase the overall ticket size. So another one is to reduce the overheads in some way. Is that something you guys also help them out with that, or is that your only opinion is to go increase your pricing? That's it.
Right. That's the great question. And I think this is where I get really frustrated with the narrative that's happening in the industry where it seems like the only thing anybody ever talks about in order to improve profitability is increasing price. And fair. For a lot of agencies, that's an opportunity. If you haven't increased your price in a long time, probably that's an opportunity for you. But that doesn't
Yeah.
actually permanently fix your profitability problems because over time, all of your costs are going to increase, right? And there are, to your point, legitimate constraints. Like it's not just a mindset problem. Your clients have budgets. If you sell to small businesses, there's only so much they can pay for a logo. And then the zeitgeist is, oh, well, then sell to different customers. But it's like, okay, well, then that's a complete re-engineering of a business's positioning. It's just not that simple. So to your point, there are fundamentally two ways to improve profitability. Yes, we can increase the amount of income that our team makes.
Sure.
And pricing is not the only way to do that. We can become more efficient at earning revenue, thereby increasing the effective rate that we work at. So, for example, if I charge you $10,000 for an SEO package, I could double my rate in theory if I spent half as much time to earn that $10,000 as I did before. That has the same net impact on my
That,
earning efficiency as doubling my price. So efficiency is one side. I could also improve my margins by leaving the amount of time and the amount that I charge the same, but decreasing the average cost of an hour of labor. So finding less expensive people to do that same work.
yep.
And the third lever that I have to pull is increasing utilization, which means if I have, let's say, 10,000 hours of capacity, if I can utilize instead of 5,000 of those 10,000 hours for client work, 6 or 7,000 hours, then again, we become more profitable as an organization because our team can earn more revenue with the same cost basis. So there are a lot of levers that are not price increases that we can and should be paying attention to that can have a massive impact on profitability. And so that is our role, is to make sure that you can measure all of those levers. You can understand how different your current performance is from your theoretical max performance. So you can have a more nuanced perspective on how to achieve the profitability goals that you have as a business. Our job is not to prescribe to you which of those things to do. It's to help you understand where your opportunities are and have a coaching conversation where we come to a next step that has buy-in from you as well. Because I don't think there's actually much value in us saying you should do this if you as a business owner are not excited or confident in doing that thing. And so
Yep.
if I'm like, hey, go increase your prices, Rohan, and you're like, I don't want to do that. My job as a consultant is not to try and sell you on why you should increase your pricing. My job is to then say, okay, well, here are 3 other ways that we can get to your objective. Which of those do you like best? And then help you actually take action on doing that thing.
Yep. And how about the exit plans? Do you guys really help them out with the exit plans as well? So let's say there is a business coming to you and they say, oh, we are doing really good, but we're still on the paychecks at the moment. So the
Mhm.
business is not really getting too much profitable for us. So we really want to get it out of that. Is that something you guys really help them out at Parakeeto for any kind of like acquisition models for them, or help them out to exit out of the entire business thing? Is it this?
We do quite a bit of work in the context of M&A, but we're not M&A advisors or brokers. So we have great partners that we tend to refer clients out to and work in tandem with when
Yep.
somebody says, "Hey, I want to sell." What our focus tends to be on M&A is for a seller. Number
Yep.
one, how do we increase your profit as much as possible so that you make as much money from that sale as possible? Because as you know, when you sell a business, you're generally selling it for a multiple of EBITDA. So let's say you're selling at 5 times
Yep.
profit, every
Yep.
dollar of profit that we can add to your bottom line is actually $5 on the exit
Right.
value. So there's this exponential compounding effect to increasing profitability. So that tends to be our focus. And the other side of our focus is making sure that all of the data is nice and clean and structured and organized. So when it comes time to do due diligence, you
Yep.
don't lose the deal because your data is a mess and it takes you forever to get the seller all the information that they need to actually assess if your business is healthy or not. So that's where we tend to focus on the seller side. And on the buyer side, often we'll be hired by buyers to go and assess an agency and come back to them with good clean numbers so they have a clear picture of, is this business worth buying, how much potential is there in this business. So that's the kind of work we do on M&A, but it's still focused purely on profitability and numbers. And then we would partner with brokers, advisors to do the actual transaction stuff.
Yep. And beside profitability, I mean, like, what other areas do you think like agencies should actually focus on to ensure a long-term success for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. Profitability is certainly a foundation.
Yep.
And without that, everything is hard, of course. But the other things that then are required in order to scale a business there's really three vectors from my perspective. The first is client acquisition. You need to have a way to get clients and do that in a way that's not only cost effective but also
Yep.
predictable. And that tends to be the first thing that you need to do. The second thing is you need to think about product, right? So do you have true product market fit? Does
Yes.
the set of promises that you make in the marketplace match up to the results you're actually able to deliver for clients? And so they're happy and they refer more people to you and they stick around. So you have to have, clarity on delivery. And then the third major component would be operations and leadership. So if you get sales and you get delivery and you're profitable, the price that you will pay for that is growth.
Yep.
And
Yep.
growth is expensive, but it
Yep.
also generally means that all of the systems that you build in the business break when you reach a new level of scale. And I
Yep.
remember speaking to an entrepreneur that built one of the largest toy companies in Canada, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, hundreds of employees, massive operation. And I remember this was when I was a younger entrepreneur. I said something to the effect of like, I just can't wait until I'm like done building all these systems and stuff. And he just laughed. He said, "You're never done." He said, "The whole point is you build something and you hope that it breaks in a year or two because you've
Yep.
grown so much that whatever that system was is
And
no longer
the
compatible
next
with the
level.
new state of the business." So having
Yes.
a team and the leadership in the business to be able to constantly recognize what needs to be updated to keep up with scale. And here's the real nuanced part of it
Yep.
is it's not about preventing things from breaking or fixing them before they break. It's understanding that there will always be a large number of things in the business that are subpar and broken, and that you can't fix them all right now because you're always resource and time constrained. So it's having the nuanced capability of saying, how do we prioritize this actually? How do we accept the fact that there's something that's not working the way that it should in the business, but we still choose to not fix it because we actually should be fixing this other thing right now? And being able to have the wherewithal to constantly kind of be in that state as the business scales and empower other people to make good decisions around that. So I would say that outside of just profitability, those would be the other three major components. If you can nail those, then you're going to be having a fun ride, but you'll be dealing with growth challenges, which are the
Um,
kinds of challenges we want to be dealing with.
yep. So let's take a quick a layman question, I would say. A
Yeah,
business is coming to you and they're saying, "Hey, Marcel, can you help me up to take my business to the next level?" Agency, they have started in, maybe it's just like a 2 years old agency with no systems at all. So what
yeah.
the action plan would be, you're gonna suggest them in that case? Number one,
Yeah.
I think you're gonna start with collecting all the data to have a system for them where they can get all the data at one place. But again, what's your take on that one?
Yeah, well, the problem in that situation is they probably don't have any data. So there's no data to collect or analyze, right? So this is part of the reason why. And honestly, if we went and collected all of their data, that's going to tell us what's actually happening in the business. And that's actually not the most important question to start with. The most important question to start with is this business planning for success from the start? And most of the time when we audit a business, we start with that question. And what we find is there is a discrepancy between what the owners expect from business and what's possible for that business. They don't realize that their business is actually designed to fail relative to their expectations.
They,
So that's
they
the
go with
first
the
question
flow.
we need to answer.
Yeah, they go with the
Right.
flow, I guess.
Exactly. And it is complicated to reconcile the relationship between your team and how much they're paid and how many hours they work and how much time off they get, right? And all of those things, your finances and how much you spend across different areas of the business, and your sales and pricing and how much you charge for things. Those three things, if anything changes in any of those three areas, it changes the entire business from a profitability perspective and from a model perspective. So that's the first thing that we need to do is build a
Yep,
model of their business so we
yep,
can see, okay, what is the best possible outcome for this business? If everything went perfectly, what would the outcome be? And does that align to what you expect and want? And if the answer is no, then the question is, which of all of these levers should we pull so that we can get the business to be capable of achieving the outcome?
yep,
And once we understand that, then we can start to look at, okay, let's start forecasting, selling from a place of setting the business up for success. And then the last step actually is let's start tracking time and, measuring things more closely so we can understand what's happening that's different than what we expect and planned for. So that's the typical process that we go through. And the reason we do that is because, to my point earlier, even if you've never tracked time before, you have no project management systems, you don't have any of this data, you could still take a massive step in the right direction just by starting with the model and gain a lot of
yep,
clarity. And it doesn't
yep,
require cleaning up historical data, setting up a whole bunch of systems, changing anything in the business. And usually we can get that insight to people within a week. So
yep,
it's a really quick win. And then it gives us clarity on where we should actually be focused going
yep,
forward. So we're not solving
yep,
all kinds of problems that are actually not the important thing to be solving.
yep. But again, this is more from the data, from the overall systems and building out the things. The lead generation is another thing which you guys need to tell them, hey, you're not really getting any kind of leads. A lot of time, I guess the people they come across, they say, okay, we are not getting leads, and that's where the problem is. But when I'm like, if I'm looking at, I always tell them, hey, how much effort you are really putting in to actually get the leads. Okay, no, I'm not running any kind of ads. I'm not really good doing any organic. Okay, so the problem is not sitting there. The problem is sitting way behind. You need a systems like a funnels or maybe lead magnets or video brands or video content or something to generate the amount of leads. Is that something you guys actually help them out with the lead
No.
generation as well? Okay,
No, we
so
don't.
like
We don't. We assume like when people come to work with us, they've already figured out how to get customers, right? And
okay,
to me, that's like, of course, the first thing that everybody has to figure out. And there's so many other people out there solving that problem. We don't need to
yep,
be solving that problem. The problem
gotcha.
we're solving is to me, the much harder thing, which is, okay, now I figured out how to get customers. How do I actually fucking scale this thing? How do I be profitable, right?
Okay,
And so, yeah, like to your point, if somebody comes to us and we can see right away, like, oh, your problem is you just don't have enough leads and sales, we're going to refer those people out to other folks. By the
okay,
time they get to us, that's not their problem anymore. Like,
okay.
their problem is, hey, we've grown. Like, this is the story I hear all the time. I had these two founders come to me and they said, dude, we've tripled our business in the last 18 months. We went from 1 to 3 million. Our team has grown. We have more revenue, more clients, more projects than ever. And these two founders were making less money at 3 million in revenue personally. Like they were taking home less money as owners at 3 million than they were at 1 million. And they're like, how is this possible? We don't understand how this could possibly happen. That's why they come to us because they don't even know where to start to fix that problem. And we were able to show them how to increase their profitability by over 500% without cutting any overhead costs, without growing their team, right? It was all just efficiency, even without changing the number of clients that they had, and give them a system that they can use to measure what's happening and make the right decisions. So
Yep.
that's really where we exist. It's a much smaller swath. It's not the thing that most agencies are talking about, but it's
Yep.
the problem that you have to solve. It's the reward for figuring how to get clients is now you have to figure this other stuff out too.
No, that makes sense actually. That you guys don't really focus too much on the lead generation. You look at that second picture into the thing. Now the leads are coming in, how to make it more profitable for you so that you can actually squeeze out more juice out of it for your own
That's right.
business rather than living on a paycheck. So
Yeah.
that's pretty good, man.
And
Pretty solid.
scale because a mentor of mine who I just wrote a book with, Dan Martell, he asked me a weird question one day. He said, "Marcel, do you know what the sound of scaling is?"
Okay.
I was like, "That's a weird question." He's, "What does scaling sound like?" He said, "It's the sound of cash being sucked out of your business at an alarming rate."
That's
And
true.
having started to scale pretty quickly, he's absolutely right. It's really expensive to grow. You need to be spending money out ahead of where you are today. And so, without strong profitability, even if you have tons of leads coming in, you may not be able to keep up because you don't have the cash flow being generated. So, that's a problem that needs to get solved if you really want to scale very, very big and do it quickly.
Yep, yep. No, that's true because it's a very common problem we have seen as well. The leads are coming in, but they don't know how to actually scale the business to take it to the next level. And I guess it's one of the reason as well. I could be wrong too. Like a lot of people, the agencies, they actually be in the kind of a plateau state. They don't know how to actually get out of that particular situation. Or maybe I think like it is more important to actually go and start following the person who has crossed that situation, who
Hmm.
can help you out to take you out of that plateau thing, isn't it? So
Yeah. And it's really interesting because what I see those plateaus be, they typically coincide with building layers of management. So the first plateau is right around 10 people, right? And why is that a plateau? Well, as an owner, you can't manage, 10 plus people. So you have to start hiring managers and you start to remove yourself from the work. So what's hard about that, of course, is your identity inside of the business, the job that you do, your leadership, that all has to change, and other people have to now be accountable to results. So there's a coinciding of a leadership, which is hard, and data, because those people need to understand, am I doing a good job or not? And if you
ex-
have no system to tell them that and to measure that, that's a problem. That second ceiling is around 25, 30. So that's the next layer of management. The third ceiling is around 50 to 60 employees. You're building out a C suite, your third level of management.
yep,
And it's crazy how consistent the plateaus almost always coincide with the point in your growth where you have to install that next layer of people that are now accountable for the things that you used to be accountable for.
exactly right. That's very true. That's a very solid point in itself, Marcel. All right. No, that's Superman. I guess we really had a great session. Very good talk about it. So anyone who really wants to know more about you, want to read your stuff, your videos or anything, what's the best place for that is?
Yeah, I would say head to parakeeto.com and we actually have a free toolkit. So if you want to start understanding how to measure the profitability in your agency and improve it, we put
Yep.
together a free course called the
Okay.
Agency Profit Toolkit. So you can grab that at parakeeto.com/toolkit.
Yep.
And on our website, you'll find tons of free content, blogs, podcast episode, videos. So this is all we talk about, agency profitability. So head there if you want to learn more about us and consume more of
Sure.
our stuff.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely. Once the video goes live, I'll put it on all those links, even your LinkedIn profile link as well, um, in the video description. So yeah, no, thanks for that, Marcel. I really appreciate the time you have given us, sir, and really spilled out too much golden nuggets for us because I believe, and that's true. I'm a guy who really believe like it's very important to have a proper process in place with the right kind of a data as well. For example, for our Zohos, like we said, we pulled out the leads, we pulled out all the conversations and everything, whatever we're doing from every possible way using webhooks, APIs, and everything, so that we have a more clear picture into the place. But I know a lot of agencies, they don't really do that. It's they feel like
Yeah.
whatever is going on, let it be going on. So I think this is where it is really very important to do touch with the companies like you who can really help them out to build out a system in place for it.
Well, I'll finish by saying one last thing, and I think you'll like this, which
Yeah.
is that, people ask me all the time, they're like, Marcel, the last 10 years, margins have been getting tighter in agencies. So everyone's positioning, getting tighter into niches, pricing models, value-based pricing, flat rate pricing, all this stuff. They start to look at offshore labor, they're adopting software. What's next, right? The margin pressure just keeps coming. So what's the next step now that all of that is table stakes? And I actually think it's what you're doing, which is internal specialization. And this is a
Yep.
big idea. It's not just about who's your customer, it's
Yep.
about as an organization, what are our strengths operationally? And you
Yep.
run a white label business, which means you have to be a great operator.
Yep.
That's part of what you sell is you're the person that they're going to trust with being able to scale and
Yep.
repeatedly, consistently deliver results to their clients.
Yep.
And you have to be a really strong operator. And so you recognize that about yourself, I'm sure. And you said, hey, these are the things I'm really good at. They come naturally to me. So you built a business that allows you to focus on that versus another organization that they might say, hey, we're not great operators. We don't really like this stuff, but we love sales, we love marketing, we love client relationships. And so they
Exactly.
might build a business that focuses on that and partner with someone like you. And I
Yep.
think this is where our industry is headed, is people starting to recognize it's not enough to just specialize externally. We also have to specialize internally and really
Yep.
lean into our strengths as an organization. And you're going to have to start to make decisions about, are we really going to become highly sophisticated operations, or are we going to partner with other firms that have done that and focus on other strengths that we have?
Yeah, that's true. No, thanks for that, sir. Um, yeah, I'll definitely keep that thing in mind as well because it is important to find out the strengths and focus on that only rather than be a jack of everything, I guess. So yeah. All right. Thanks, Marcel. Thanks for your time. And I wish you good luck for your future endeavors as well, for a great growth of Parakeeto as well.
Thank you for having me, Ron. This was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.